Good evening and welcome to Images 2020, the discussion with the jurors. I'm Eric Dillner, the CEO of the Shoreline Arts Alliance. And while we've had a remarkable month with Images 2020 Reimagined, thank you so much for joining us tonight. We have several special things planned for you. The main event, looking into the minds of our jurors. After that, the announcement of the Audience Choice Award. Well, okay, actually, way after that is the Audience Choice Award. Tonight at 7:45, we'll close the voting and we'll tally all the numbers. And then we'll come back and let you know how we're doing. So you have a little bit of time yet still to vote. I want to thank you in advance for the $5 contribution that many of you made already as you placed your vote. That was very generous of you to help us in providing free submissions to those who needed a little financial help this year. So we so appreciate that extra help by dropping that little money in the jar. And last but not least, we'll hear from Cindy Wu in her musical interpretation of two more of our pieces. So don't forget, we're on Facebook Live, and we're also available via the Zoom chat. Send us questions. Believe it or not, they're already coming in, ladies and gentlemen, of our jury. So be ready. They're coming. So I'm very excited about it. And at the end of the evening, we'll head into what I call joining us all on the virtual stage for a snapshot and a little bit of fun. So. I just can't tell you how much we're going to miss these fabulous folks. They're highly lauded as remarkably talented and respected authorities in the world of photography. But most importantly, they are wonderful people. They took such care to view each and every one of the 950 plus pieces that were submitted this year, and then offered to come back tonight and share their thoughts with you. This is something in the 39 years of Images we've never had the opportunity to do, is talk to the jurors, find out what's in their head, what makes them tick, and you know, why those pieces ended up on the wall, so to speak. So on behalf of all of us, I want to thank the jurors, Sean Kernan, Jessica Roscio, and Ron Rosenstock, for your generosity in all the things that you've done, from the award ceremony to judging to tonight. So in advance, thank you, thank you, thank you. So I've invited each of them now to say a few words about the body of work, and then they'll launch into a discussion, pick a few pieces out to talk about, and then there we go. So Sean, would you like to start the ball rolling and talk a little bit about the body of work?
Well, thank you. Good evening, everybody out there. I see a number here that suggests that you are out there, and I miss you, but here we are. This is quite this is a different undertaking than what I expected, or than what I've experienced in the past. The wonderful thing about doing this is that if you're a photographer, you see, you get a sense of your own history. You see things that you have done or tried to do, and somebody else has actually brought it off. The other thing about it is this: whenever I'm in a city, anywhere in the world, one of my first stops has to be their National Gallery, their major museum, because everything in it was somebody's best work, and not only did the maker think so, but the years had thought so too. Well, the same thing works with this. Photography is this thing that we go around and do, and then something takes over for a moment, and we get this extraordinary thing, and it has an energy. It has it really throws something right back at you when you see it. It changes the eye, changes the mind of the person who did it. And if they make that clear, then it changes the mind and the eye of the person who sees it. Well, we got to see that 900 times. So that was it was dizzying. It was really quite wonderful. The other great thing about doing this with my fellow jurors is that I got to see and even reconsider things by seeing them through other eyes, through somebody who sees something that I don't, and that's another gift. It is so much fun to do this, and it's so much better than having a job. I've got to tell you.
Great. Well, thank you, Sean, very much. So our next person to share a little bit is Jessica Roscio. So Jessica.
Okay. Well, again, Eric, thank you all. Thank you, everybody out there in the ether. And Sean and Ron, it has been a lot of fun. I always love jurying exhibitions, and this has been a particularly unique experience, even in the realm of virtual exhibitions. And I think it always sounds a bit cliched when you talk about a body of work as having a gut reaction to a particular piece, but I think that when you're scrolling through that's how you initially encounter the pieces. If there's something that gives you pause and you want to come back to it, and then you do come back to it and you stop and you settle on it, that's a way of going through the process of jurying. And certainly that's what happened in this show. I'd say that absolutely everything in this show is something that I came back to and I thought about, and I've had the benefit of having two other jurors who see things differently from myself. And so that's been also, as Sean said, a way to reconsider works. I'm not a photographer, but my academic background is in 19th century photographic history. So I find that I'm particularly drawn to pieces that draw from the past and that reference objects and that are referencing alternative processes. But I need to be jolted out of the 19th century a fair amount. So I appreciate when a work does that for me, and the works in this show, a number of the works in this show really did. I also think I've gone back and I've gone through the exhibition a couple of times. When you jury a show, you start to feel some ownership over it. And you're like, oh, I remember that one, and it goes really well with that one. And so this is a show that I've really enjoyed going back to a number of times over the past 2 weeks. And it gives me a sense of kind of what's happening now in photography in terms of all aspects in terms of processes and subject matter. And I've also I've started looking at some of the artists' websites just to see where the works in this exhibition might fit into their larger body of work. And that's another revelation. So the show is fabulous, but it's fabulous because the entries and the people in the show do fabulous work. So thank you.
Thank you, Jessica. Ron, could you share a little bit with us this evening?
I'm unmuted.
There you go.
There I go. Well, going last, I have to say I agree with everything that Sean and Jessica have said, and I'd like to add a few other things. 950 images. When I first heard there were 950, I said, "Oh my goodness, that's going to be almost an unbelievable task, to really go through these and to be as objective as possible." And as Sean and Jessica both said, it really helped kind of bouncing ideas off each other. And we spent many hours, going over each one, meticulously. And talking about many hours, I have to say probably for every hour we spent, I would say Eric spent 3 or 4. So like kudos to Eric, who really held the whole thing together and had this wonderful vision from beginning to end. So thank you, Eric, for doing this. And so getting back to this virtual exhibit, totally different from anything I've really done before, to do it like totally virtually. In past times when I've judged and I would do it online, there'd be an exhibition in a gallery, and I could see the work on the walls, and presentation does make a big difference. So this was really quite unique in that doing it all virtually, it kind of levels the playing field in a sense, in that I couldn't tell if someone cut a bad mat. you know, like none of that showed. There was no, the presentation was the immediacy of each particular image that we really kind of got into. And as Jessica said, we kind of felt like we owned it. I mean, all 950 images, you know, kind of had an impact on me. You know, it was very, very difficult kind of getting it down to just the few that we really felt had something even a little bit more special for us. But in a way, I mean, every one of them were winners, you know, and it was really a delight for us to kind of, you know, experience all these wonderful images. I'll tell you a quick little story, you know, about shows. I myself have entered a number of different exhibitions, and occasionally I would get, you know, a big prize, first place prize, and perhaps a check with it. And then I'd enter that winning photograph in a different exhibition, and it wouldn't even be accepted. So this is, you know, this is the world of judging. You know, it's like in the eyes of the beholder, we're all just human, and we all kind of react to the images in sort of a unique way, just as each photographer sees in a very unique way, unlike any other photographer, obviously. So, you know, all in all, it was just a fabulous experience, and I want to thank each and every one of you for participating in this, and it was just a joy to do this. So, thank you.
Well, thank you all. We can't thank you all enough. So as a group, they came together and came up with a juror's statement that maybe many of you all have read. But is there anything as a group you all want to share with us before we launch into some pictures, or should we head into the photo land?
Photo land. That's easy.
Photo land. All right, let's do it. So we've elected Ron to select his first, a few pieces that he'd like to talk about. So Ron, I'll get them up on the screen while you launch in here.
Well, folks, I got to first do a little intro here that, you know, Eric asked us all kind of to choose the images that we related to perhaps more than others, you know, and I really was drawn to this work by Thomas Wells, perhaps because it's very similar to my work. That's why, you know, there's just something that's really just delightful about this particular work. For many years, I worked with a large format, you know, 8x10 view camera, and then went down to a 4x5. And this kind of feels like that kind of large format mentality. You know, it captures, you know, the atmosphere. You know, the one in the middle, which is of architecture, of Trinity Fountains Abbey. You know, when you're photographing architecture, you're really photographing somebody else's art. You know, think about that. If you're an architect, your building that you created, that is really your art. So here, as a photographer, we have to ask ourselves, you know, what is the architect trying to say? You know, what is he trying to convey? And you know, I believe that this particular image just speaks volumes. It's reverential, you know, sort of the atmosphere. You could kind of feel like you're there. It's just a beautiful, delightful image. You know, the other three, you know, the Corfe Castle and Glastonbury Tor and St. Govan's Chapel in Wales. Again, you know, you really feel like you're there experiencing you could breathe the air. You could kind of smell the mist in the air. You could feel the sunlight on Corfe Castle, you know, which is a fascinating photograph because, you know, of all the history of that castle, you know, between the Saxons and the Normans and the battles that have been fought there. And now, like, time has just laid it all to rest in a very peaceful, beautiful way, you know, and Thomas happened to be right there at that moment with those beautiful long shadows and soft clouds, and just created this beautiful atmosphere. You know, each photograph kind of represents that moment of recognition. You know, you go to a place to photograph, and you know, it's like it's like using the tripod as a divining rod. You kind of put it down and in a certain place that speaks to you, and you kind of look through it, and the image just really speaks to you. And all of these really spoke to me in a very special way. So, I thank you for creating them, Thomas. Really a beautiful, beautiful work.
Absolutely. Sean or Jessica, do you have anything you'd like to add with these folks, these photos?
What Ron said.
What Ron said. All right. Well, it sounds like you're anxious to move along here, which is good. That's good. So, Tom, if you're with us, hopefully you are. We're so thrilled. Whoops. We're so thrilled to be able to share. Many of you who've been with us tonight, several nights before, know that this young lady, Cindy Wu, has a project called Sound It Out, and she has taken a look at your work here and has given us a small little musical interpretation. I should say short, not little, very impactful. So let's listen to Cindy here. Pretty wonderful. Thank you so much, Cindy, for that wonderful, wonderful work. I think, Jessica, you're up here.
Yes. So I think all of us really agreed on during the award ceremony, the artists that were awarded first prize winners, we had spoken about them. But as Ron said, Eric asked us to pull out a couple of pieces that really spoke to us, maybe perhaps individually. And I will definitely say that these two by Nicole Croce, and if I'm mispronouncing last names, I apologize. I was instantly drawn to, and it was funny because for part of the jurying, I had my 7-year-old daughter as a kind of constant companion right next to me. And as I was going through certain images, she was like, well, tell me why you like that, or do you really like that? And when the piece Untitled of the emergency exit door popped up, she was like, I was like, oh, I love this. And she was like, why exactly? And so I think one of the things that I like so much about both of these pieces is the landscape aspect of the landscape within a landscape, and that they are taken from mundane spaces. And you can think of yourself, if you were standing at this door, if you were standing in that hallway, would you stop and think that it was a composition? Would you take this picture? I mean, these are places that we've literally all found ourselves. But then this becomes an image. And I really love the idea of the frame within a frame within a frame, and that them being landscapes, but the largest landscape is actually the one that is the smallest in both of these images. And so you do get this very artificial frame around what is an expansive natural world behind. So I know that these are not the only two works that are in the series, but I think the works that are the interior looking out at the exterior, and again, particularly seeing them like this, just virtually, I think any image that I'm then desperate to see what it looks like in person and how it might be presented in an exhibition. They leave me wanting more, and that's a good thing. So I thank you, Nicole. I really enjoyed these works, even though my daughter was not entirely sure why. They're excellent.
That's great. I love it. So shall we head along to the next shot, or does anyone else want to weigh in? Looks like we can go ahead. All right, that's great. So we have Sean interpreting this piece for us.
Interpreting it. I think it's
Maybe
one
that's the wrong way to put it.
it's one that the interpret. There's no need for interpretation. It's done as it is. And it was interesting that we all responded to this piece. I think something happens in photography when you first take it up. You have this time of learning your machine, and then you go out and you start looking at things and taking pictures, and then something happens sometime within the first 3 or 4 months, which is you get back and you look at we used to look at our contact sheets. Now we go through our files and we come across something and we say, did I take that? Did I even take that? And it feels as though you're out someplace on the edge of the pond and a strange figure in a black cape and a big black hat sidles up to you and says, "May I borrow your camera?" Click, "Thank you," and walks away. And you think, what was that about? This is what's that about. You get back and you see this thing where you just step outside of your everyday view, and you may not even know it. You may not even be aware of it at the time. There are people who say that they know right away out there when they've taken a good picture. I'm not one of those people, but you get back and here's this thing that seems to be bigger than you are, and that's a signal to you that you're bigger than you thought you were, and that if you pursued this, you could find more of this kind of thing. I went to a talk by Todd Hito once, and he was going through his stuff, and in the middle of it, he kind of paused and he said, I think I'm addicted to the feeling of having taken a good picture. And I knew right away what he meant. It is like a drug. It's just like this, something you've taken that makes you bigger. So this is I might have walked by this and said, crack in the ice, kind of interesting. And I might have taken a picture or two, but it might have just been a picture of a crack in the ice. Here it turned into something completely different. So and this is such a good example of that happening. I'm so glad she did it, because now I get it too. And that's what I got to say. There is some music about this, isn't there?
There is.
I'll be very interested to see that, because a lot in workshops that I do, we actually use a lot of music. Thanks to a guy named Bill Westney, who teaches something called his On Masterclass to overtrained musicians. And I brought him into my class and we used it in photography. He said, I don't see what this would have to do with photography. And I said, I don't either, but I know it will. And it will. So I'm very happy to see this juxtaposition.
All right, here we go. Well, thank you, Allison, for inspiring us all, and Cindy to do that. Wonderful job. Thank you again, Cindy. She's done 5 of those for us now, and we will next week have those starting to be released on our Facebook page individually and in all of our other social media aspects. So thank you again, Cindy and Allison, for for inspiring that great work. So our next selections here are from Ron.
Well, again, it was really hard to come up with just a few that I like that spoke to me, but certainly the work of Marie Curtis kind of jumped out at me for a number of reasons. There's a certain feeling of like being present to the moment, of like, I feel like I'm there looking through my camera, like almost like as if these are my images. They're so realistic. All three of them. The one of the chair has the soft light on it, and in that right side has the the source of that light. It's just a beautiful interpretation. And there's something about the chair. You wonder how many people have sat in that chair. I mean, if a chair could speak and tell us about what has gone on. And it's obviously not a new chair. It's been there for a long time. It feels like it's in an attic. It probably could tell quite a story. And like that middle one with that soft light coming in, I think she calls it bent light, as it says right over it. Again, I just want to walk in that room and absorb all that beautiful light. The arch to the arch almost has a sort of a reverential feeling with the light kind of floating into it. It's sort of like being in a very special place. And then, the radiator has such a strong sense of presence, like a mighty oak tree almost. It's there and it's solid on those great big legs. It reminds me of something Minor White once said about photographing something for what it is and for what else it is. There's like like the feeling of the essence of that radiator that kind of comes through. And then there's this kind of relationship between that dark spot on the wall and the flower pot, with that it's probably a wire or something behind that protrusion in the wall. But the balance of it is just really, really perfect. And just a strong sense of presence to all these three images. And you could just feel like you're right there at the moment. I've often said that good technique is invisible. When something is not done right, that kind of jumps out at you. But when it's right, it's like you are there, you're the viewer, and you're right there, kind of experiencing what the photographer wanted to convey. It's that as I said earlier, like that moment of recognition. I think Edward Weston called it the flame of recognition. I mean, different photographers had a different expression for that moment of making the exposure. Cartier-Bresson's famous one of the decisive moment. It's I once had an exhibition of my work. I called it the eternal moment. And these images convey all those expressions. There's just a very strong sense of presence. They come right out. Nothing's held back. Really beautiful. Thank you, Marie Curtis, for producing these beautiful images. Eric, you're muted.
Thank you, Ron. And here we go, Jessica. Thank you.
Okay, so I think every so often I'll come across an image that just kind of gives you almost like, I feel like there's kind of been like a punch to the gut in terms of it really speaking to how I think about photography. And these three works by Andrea Letters did that for me. I forget which one popped up on the screen first, but I was thrilled that there was more than one. And I think with this whole series, it was certainly a combination of composition and concept, because the composition is very clean and relatively minimal and very simple with all of them, of just, the blank book against a background. And I think that could be enough, but adding, just that one bit of, the romance, the young adult, the mystery, having the light and the natural world and the way it reflects upon the page, then transforming the entire image, added yet another layer for me. So this was the type of work where I I kept looking at it, despite, I think, the kind of just straightforward aspect of the composition, but also because it was something else that I wanted. I was like, clearly there must be more than 3 of them. So I think it's kind of came up in the award ceremony too. I gravitate towards individual works, certainly, but also when a series really seems to come together. And these were 3 works that I could not get out of my head. And I think that this story behind them could probably go in any number of directions, and that's probably one of the things that makes them even more successful. So yeah, I definitely enjoyed these a lot. Thank you.
Thank you, Jessica. And Sean wanted to speak about this piece.
Yes, I am. This piece really kind of knocked me over. It came out of nowhere. It has a kind of I assume that that's an old negative that has then been repurposed into this thing, into this piece that we see. I have a very strong karmic connection, and I don't even believe in karma, but a strong karmic connection to China. And I have many Chinese friends. I had a wonderful Chinese calligraphy teacher with whom I studied for 25 years. And it was just eye-opening being with her. But one of the things that my eyes were open to was the bravery of coming to another country, the bravery of being an immigrant, the bravery of landing, even if you're well connected, even if you know somebody here, you land and you suddenly don't know a thing, and you're like an infant again. And that's how most of us got here. I don't know what the percentage is. Only Native Americans didn't get here that way. So I find it kind of disturbing to see this denigration of immigrants and the immigration process, when I think of how enriched we have been by immigrants. I mean, you wouldn't have me if you didn't have immigration. Think of it that way. But so this brought this very much alive to me, and its connection to with the calligraphy on the left, that way of representing things, and the layering and the photography of it. It really just, it didn't look like anything I'd seen before, and it all worked for me. So that's what I gotta say. Very
wonderful. Good. And Jessica wanted to talk about these 4 pieces.
Oh, yes. And I realized, Eric, I even going back through, I think I found a 5th one too, but I will not throw that upon you. But I think one of the things that I'm always drawn to color, and I know that sounds like a super basic thing to say, but I love when color is done well, and particularly when it's almost done over the top. So kind of this intense hyper color. And so these are a couple of images where that really struck out for me, or appeared for me. I like the sense of of artificiality. Particularly in the Magnolia Reflections by Lisa Kuchara. I like this kind of plastic, fantastic look to it, and the idea that I think we all know that the camera doesn't capture reality. Like, we know what we're seeing is not what we take a picture of, is not exactly how things are. But this kind of over the top color really kind of heightens that sense of, the artificial nature of what we might be capturing with the camera, and, and how that can be manipulated. So I had written down, it was Lynn Fisher's Possibilities, and Breathe by Michael Finelli, which is the one that I added after the fact. And then the Magnolia Reflections by Lisa Kuchara, Passage by Bill Gore, and Blue Sky East Side by John Maggie. There's other color certainly in there, but these were ones where I was really struck by it. So I'm probably not doing color justice by talking about it, but it's something that always pops when you get to have that sort of very hyper color in a juried show. So thank you.
Wonderful. Well, thank you. That's great. And Sean really wanted to talk about this piece.
Yeah. just looking at it, I laugh, as I did the first time that I saw it. I don't know why Oscar Raylander, I think that's how you pronounce it, came into my awareness today, who made something called Two Ways of Life, with 32 different negatives. This is an 18 something. And he is the heir to Oscar, and it's a lot easier. He can be grateful for that. But what I loved about this, photography can get a little ponderous sometimes. You may have noticed we have to do something that is important and serious here. This is a tremendous amount of work, tremendous amount of thinking, a tremendous amount of good humor on the part of the photographer to jolly and wrangle these people and to get them to actually be having fun and not just look like they're having fun. I mean, who feels like they're having fun when they get a camera pointed at them? Nobody. And yet somehow Mystina managed it. So there's so much to do to walk through this thing and to meet these groups of people and these different people. It made my heart sing. It made me want to go over there. It also made me wonder if she'd ever done something where people fought and it really didn't work. So she just went with that. Anyway, I'd love to see that family too. Maybe I'd volunteer my family for that. Just terrific fun. That's it.
Well, thank you. Thank you. So I'll call that the end of the pre-selected portion of our program. How's that? Number one, I want to just again say congratulations to all of you. I'm just amazed at the show. Everyone is contacting Shoreline Arts Alliance constantly saying, wow, I just saw the show and it looks fantastic. So congratulations to all you winners, all you who got your honorable mentions. I hope you've all figured that out by now. And of course, just so you know, obviously it was stiff competition. We encourage you to, keep thinking. Now, it's almost 7:45, which is when I said we're gonna stop the voting and do the tally. And it's a perfect time for us to start to ask questions of the jurors. We have one question that is, I think, still pertinent to the discussion. I think you all have pulled a lot of them away. I think you'll enjoy this question because I think, anyway, the question we all want answered is why did you pick my photograph? And in this case, it's David Eller asking about steel wolves. You all remember steel wolves, of course you do. So I don't know if I can get there, but I might try while you all chat about that.
Well, I would say my gut reaction to that was it was just really cool. And like, I know that doesn't sound very academic, but particularly viewing it as a triptych. I mean, I think you can see photographs of shadows a lot, but it was really interesting. And I mean, I know that's probably not a satisfactory answer for me to be like, that was just a really cool photograph. But it was, particularly viewing them all together. So that was my initial reaction. Y'all can probably say something smarter.
Yeah, I have a thought that, because I remember coming across that, and there were a number of pictures of artworks in the show.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing is, I think that artworks or the Grand Canyon, you can maneuver yourself in front of them, but you've got to transform it in some way. You've got to do something interesting with it. Maybe, and that could be waiting for the light, or it could be just really seeing the energy, which is what I think happens in the wolves photographs, is that by breaking it into threes, and I don't know if he intended to do that while he was doing it, but that's something that may have emerged out of what he has there. So there's the central element, and then there are these other two, and so suddenly time gets into it. Suddenly scale changes quite a bit, and so you have to instead of just admiring the representative.
Whoops.
and the birds. How did he ever think of that?
Whoops.
So now when you look at it, he's literally taken it into time, broken it apart, and a viewer has to reassemble it. There's no, I forget who the painter was who said there's no, Robert Rauschenberg said, there is no subject for a painting that is any more interesting than any other subject. So it's not about subject, but it's how you swallow it and bring it back out again, which is evident in this. That's why I responded to this.
Yeah, I totally agree. Like it transforms from what was there to the way David saw the image, and working on these different layers and different scale between. You can't even differentiate between what is the sculpture and what is the shadow. It all becomes sort of one thing together. And the triptych is wonderful. It's like a pack of these kind of space wolves, It's like wolves from the darkest reaches someplace. But yet against like a schoolroom wall or something, that concrete wall and back, but it's like you really get a sense of that angst almost, that these creatures are making. Well, that's because of the artist and the way David sort of interpreted, these beautiful images. So it works on different levels. It's really pretty amazing.
Great. So I think we've actually covered everything else. So are there any other questions out there in this virtual world, or is there anything that you all didn't get to say that you want to share with us?
Yeah, I've got an answer that nobody's asked a question about yet.
Okay.
There's a couple of thoughts that I had going through this, and which is there are photographers have long since gotten beyond just the print. You can print it on black velvet. You can turn it into a pillow. You can do all kinds of wonderful things with photographic imagery. I remember a guy in my class once. Actually, it was John Paul Caponegro. He had a black room, and you'd walk in, and there was a projector running, and you didn't know what was going to happen. Then you noticed that there was a dish of flour next to the projector. And if you picked up the flour and sprinkled it through the air, the picture appeared. And then as the flour fell, it drifted away. And it was so immediate. That's the kind of thing that is not, I hope that I think this virtual thing will continue, and it has been going on for a while, but I hope that we'll find ways to incorporate different ways of embodying the image in photography, whether it's motion, whether it's making a pillow out of it or something. I don't know, but I'd hate to see that get lost, because I think it's a great impulse.
Thank you. Great right there. So we do have some questions now rolling in. Glowing screen versus physical prints in this submission process? Question mark.
Never saw the prints. How would we know?
I would have preferred. I mean, I kind of relate more to the actual photographs. I mean, I really it's different this way. That's all. You know, we take it for what it is. But I would have loved to have seen the actual images. You know, because I feel presentation is very important as well. It's not just the vision. It has to be how it's presented. But but we had no idea because it really is. You know, we just got the images. You know, for this. So it is what it is. But I personally would have preferred to actually see the photographs.
I think there are pros and cons each way. Certainly it's wonderful to be, you would love to be able to see the works in person, and because you do get a sense of the presentation and how they might actually appear on the walls. But when you have an online submission, you're more accessible. You can submit more works, you can show more of yourself as an artist. Perhaps if you would not have been able to physically get your works there, there's a way of you're basically become more open in a more inclusive show, and that's always a good thing. But I do feel cheated to not be able to actually ever see these works in person hanging on the wall. So I think that, you know, it's hard to come down solely on one side or the other, but you know, you want to think of a photograph as being an object, so you want to be able to converse with it in person.
We better get used to it. It's going to be around. But back in the day, if Thomas Jefferson wanted to bounce an idea off George Washington, he had to get in his horse and ride for 2 days, and then he'd spend a couple of days, and they'd have dinner and they'd talk and walk, and then he'd ride back to Charlottesville. Now he'd email or message, and something has been lost out of that exchange, you know. So, but that's what he would do now.
So we have an interesting question that just came in. I would like to know what you did not see but would have loved to have seen, if only ...
I don't think I would. Nothing comes to mind. I think I would not. I don't go into it saying, "Gee, why isn't there some of this?" or "Why isn't it better?" or "Why isn't my photograph in there?" Any of those things that you could respond to. I mean, who was it? Cactus Jack Gardner, who said, "You got to dance with who brung you," and that's what turned up. And so I didn't wish for anything. I do like other kinds of imagery. I'm particularly enamored of film these days, video, motion, and sound and stuff like that. But we couldn't do it. And maybe that's the thing, that's the opportunity I look for, to see how other things, more conceptual and surrounding things might incorporate into this.
No, and I would agree with that. I don't necessarily felt like that there were things that were missing, but I mean, I certainly enjoy artists who are working with alternative processes, and there were some cyanotypes in there which were in the show which were gorgeous. But I know particularly, I think as we start thinking about, well, as things are digital, and you do then start thinking about the photograph more as, you know, an object and a one-of-a-kind object. And so you do see artists that are, you know, doing contemporary daguerreotypes and using the collodion process. And I think that, or even photographic objects, artist books, and I don't know how you know, all of that, all that is incorporated. But that's certainly an interesting thing that I've been seeing. I also think I loved that artists could submit up to 10 images. Sometimes I wished that maybe there was a little more consistency in the 10 images that were submitted. I know one of the really successful ongoing exhibitions at the Photographic Resource Center in Boston used to do is they would have a group of artists, and each of those artists would get to show between 10 and 15 of their works, and you got much of a better sense of what their work was. And there were some artists where I was like, oh, I wish you weren't trying to be so diverse in your submissions. Like, I would like something a little more cohesive, but that's just me being picky. So I think otherwise I wasn't missing anything.
That's great. That's really nice. Good help. Very helpful.
I want to just add that it kind of ties into the last question about the virtual image versus the reality of the physical image. And this is, it's just the way it is, but I happen to have just a 12-inch screen, that I'm looking at all the images on just this one 12-inch screen, where if there's anything I would have liked to have seen, of course, if I had a larger screen and maybe a higher quality screen, the images would even be more dynamic, and the actual photographs themselves, the actual crispness and the sharpness comes through so much more, with the actual image. So that's the only thing I wanted to add here, that I wish I had perhaps a larger screen, maybe just a better quality screen, then the images would have even had more impact.
Could I toss something in? I just see a question.
Of course.
Perhaps it's because I come from a film and television background. I prefer to create for the screen. I appreciate photographic prints as art objects. To that statement, he says it's expensive and not as dynamic. I sometimes look at things on an iPad screen and I think, wow, that looks great. And there's all kinds of stuff going on in the iPad software that is, opening that up and taking that down a little bit, and then the whole thing glows. But that is a real way to look at screens. Computer screens are mostly unregulated, but something they've done with the iPad that makes things look uniformly pretty good. Maybe it'll be a standard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good. Okay, I'm gonna cut you off for just a minute here and do a little commercial. I'm just kidding. And we're gonna head on to the audience choice here. So on our way there, we just doctored some slides up real quick. Oh yeah, I wanted to remind you all that all the work is going to be at hospice this year. And we're thrilled that they have brought that over to to the bedside for everyone. We want to thank Milford Photo and Yale New Haven Health for their constant help with us year after year. We can't thank you enough for sticking with us, and all of these wonderful folks who help us in so many ways, keeping the lights on, keeping us producing wonderful programs like tonight. And of course, our Images Committee, who work tirelessly to get you all here. And our board of directors, thank you for everything. Okay, was I quick enough with that so that we can get to what you're all waiting for? We have the Audience Choice Award. And it's interesting, we were just texting back and forth. We have two that are very close. So we went with the Audience Choice as the winner. Now this person will get to submit next year free of charge. So here we go. The winner is Valencia Island Harbor, Ireland by Jerome Nevins. So jurors, that's what the crowd decided. What drew you to this piece to put it into the show?
Well, I wanted to go live there.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
There's Ron will know this, but in Ireland, there's the land called Tirnanog, which means the land of eternal youth. And this is the first known photograph of it, I would say.
And then, though we don't have a second prize, today we decided to go ahead and let you all know that the second, the one that just didn't quite get there, but so many people voted for, we wanted you to know it's titled Meditation by Isabelle Chenoweth, which is actually one of our first honors winners. So I think you all had a lot of wonderful things to say about that as well. So that's that. All right, back to our questions. We have another great question here. Were there any images? Oh, you know what I meant to ask? If we'd love to join you all to the virtual stage if you'd like. All you need to do is put your hand up. You can raise your hand and I'll start pushing you onto the stage, so to speak. But the question is, were there any images that one of you wanted to include in the exhibit that the others didn't? And how did you resolve that? The fisticuffs were going, right?
Arm wrestling. We arm wrestling.
Yeah, virtually. I don't know if we ever got to that point, because I think by the time we started talking about them, at least two of us agreed. I feel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Put us through our paces with the rounds. So
That's right. We did kind of run you through it, didn't we? So just to maybe a quick second on how we did the process is we actually sent them all each the whole set, and they had to make a selection for themselves, and then we in the office compiled all the absolute yeses, the maybes, and the nos, and came up with a strategy that only if all three said no did it go out immediately. And then we did a second round, and then we did a third round. And guess what? They weren't done, even though we thought we were going to be done at the third round. And we came back the fourth day and did another round, because literally, I can't imagine, but I was trying to figure out if three of you looked at a piece, I mean, minimum of 12 times a piece was looked at, right? I mean, at a minimum. So it was quite an extensive process. So by the time we got to the last day, there was really a unified look at this, right? I mean, I would say.
you know, it wasn't really a picture of like the cutthroat art world as we were not battling it out.
So I encourage everyone now to switch to the gallery view so we can see some of you. And obviously, if you're on there, we'd love for you to offer a question or something to say. And okay, so there's a question that I guess it goes to Ron and Sean. Do the other panelists prefer to see more consistency in genres as opposed to diversity? I think that's in answer to Jessica's question, answer a little while ago, what she likes to see.
I personally enjoyed the diversity. I mean, there was quite a lot. I mean, you know, although it's not all the kind of work I personally do, but that doesn't mean I don't enjoy it. I mean, if it works, it works. There's a lot of work as wow, I wish I could do something like that. But, you know, like I'm not great at photographing people, like a lot of those great images that I saw. You know, I'm more sort of a nature photographer, but I just love the diversity, and I thought it was really exceptionally well done. Exceptionally well done. So I'm all for diversity. John, what do you say?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't want to see what I've already seen, or what somebody would once called the already thought. I want to be woken up. I want to see something new. So I did have a student once, and there was a woman in the class, and she was doing some very ethereal and interesting stuff. And a man came up to me afterwards and said, "That's not photography." And I said, "Yes, it is photography." And he was responding sort of the way painters used to respond when photography came in, you know. And there was something was missing. You want to have your eyes opened by any piece of work, whether it's a song or a poem or a photograph or anything. So the more roles there are at that, competent, committed roles, not just churning, the better, and the better the whole pudding looked too.
And I guess I should clarify that I definitely want to see diversity in the submissions in the show. I think that there's so many different ways to interpret photography. I was mainly referencing within each artist's submission. If you can have 10 images, then I liked seeing more consistency within the submission, not all the images being the same. So
I'm the person that asked the question, and actually I understood your
Okay. Thank you.
And I should have crafted my question better. My question was related to, did they feel the same way? Consistency in a single submission as opposed to diversity overall. I expect that everybody wants diversity overall, but if you're submitting 10 photos, do you prefer to see one side of that photographer as opposed to that photographer showing that they can do more than one genre?
I think anything that really connects for the photographer should be in there. I do think, and I know this, not because I read it someplace, but because I've done it. If you can submit 10, I really like these 7, and let's see, maybe they'll like this one too. I kind of like it and throw it in and that kind of thing. And it always shows, it always stands out. There's nothing wrong with it, but you know, people do that. But I'd rather see committed work that hits rather than testing things, you know?
So we have a question from Facebook and also one over in the chat room. So let me start with the Facebook question. How important are current social themes? I changed my original focus and theme once COVID hit, and I'm now second guessing myself. Go ahead, Sean.
Okay, this question came up in a talk yesterday, and somebody said, can photography have a social impact an impact on society? And I remember after 9/11, Richard Serra was being interviewed, and somebody asked him that question, and he said, art can change the culture, can influence the culture, but no single piece can change the culture or the events. It's part of the mix. I don't think it's important to try for it. And when you try for it, if you don't get the resonance of other things, if you oversimplify and just focus on that, it tends to fall flat. It tends not to connect. That's my feeling.
All right, let's go to our next question, which is, well, actually, I think this is more a comment on what was just said. Think about all the Depression era photographers, right? Okay, how important, what's that?
I was just gonna say, if that's the material, if that's the thing that's going on, but they didn't end the depression.
Yeah, so another question is, how important is it for an image to offer a message or tell a story?
Depends on the intent of the photographer. I mean, some photographers set out to tell a story, and some just want to convey their kind of feeling of communion, you know, with the beauty of nature. And you don't have to put words to it, you just could feel it. So it's really up to the photographer, whatever they really want to do. There are a lot of dedicated photographers. I mean, just to go back one question, a lot of dedicated photographers do make a comment on what's happening, like this COVID business. Or, I mean, I think of some of the great war photographers. Mm-hmm. You know, they've done some incredible stuff that is really moving. You know, think of some of the stuff that during World War II and every war, there's been some, great photographs of horrible situations, but they really move people. They move people to action. You know, just you watch the news now, like that recent shooting. I mean, if someone didn't actually have footage of these people shooting this guy who's just out for a jog, it wouldn't have had the same impact. I mean, you really could change a society by photographs. I mean, and the opposite, well, not the opposite, but another way of doing it. I mean, think of like what Ansel Adams did, you know, developing such an appreciation for the Southwest and the national parks and Yosemite, you know, just by conveying the natural beauty of the place. It kind of moved people, you know, to keep things the way they are. So, I mean, photography really does have an impact, you know, on society, you know. So, I mean, if you're out there, go ahead, Jessica.
No, I think I was just gonna, I do not mean to interrupt at all. I think I was just gonna lean on, and then there's the 7-year-old making her appearance. I think I was just going to add on to that, that if you're a photographer, if you're an artist, and the work, Alice, honestly, in the work that you're producing is coming out of whether it's current events or, I mean, that's what you're inspired by. So I think when I'm looking at a work, I'm seeing how I'm impacted by the piece itself before I think about what the message behind it might be, or whether it's responding to current events. Because yes, certainly work comes out of everything, and you don't know how history is going to treat the work that's being produced now. So I think you should kind of just lean towards what you're feeling you should be doing and what you should be putting out there. So
Yeah, I agree.
I think that's such an important message, and all artists, I think, of all kinds need to hear that, what you just said, Jessica. Thank you, and Ron. So we've gone over a little bit. I see Sean wants to say a little bit more, but I want you to I want to just thank you all as folks are starting to sign off. I just want to make sure that you all the artists know, thank you so much for changing our lives by everything that you do. You help us think, you make us ponder, you give us things to look forward to, you help us reflect on things. I mean, I feel like I'm still new to this photography world, just coming in, even being around you all photographers for like the last 6 or 7 years. It's still every day I feel like I get something new from what you all tell me, to help me look at the work as well. And I just thank you for that. On that note, those who are visiting us, who are potentially not photographers, or you want to support a fellow photographer, I want to remind you all there's a lot of great photography here that you can take home. So don't forget to go to our website and purchase the work so that they can be supported, and also you can take this fine work home. Sean, you want to help us with another comment?
No, I forgot. In one head and out the other.
Sorry, I wasted a lot of air for you. Sorry about that. Well, if there's nothing more, that I think we've said it, and I just want to again thank my fabulous volunteer committee, the Images Committee. Lynn, if you could say something so we could at least see you pop up on the screen for a minute. I see you on the screen. We just, well, I guess she's having sound issues, but anyway, I want to thank you all so very much for all you did to make this come to life. Diana, thank you for working so hard in the office, and Whitney for working so hard in the office to make this come to life. I think we've really struck on some really neat things for Images in the future, and no matter how it progresses, I think we all learned an awful lot about how we can still share and love the work that's out there. And so thank you as an observer of all this. Thank you so much. So I think we should sign off and say good night.
Good night.
We have a comment. Thank you, Eric and the jurors, for all your hard work in putting together a wonderful exhibit. Thank you, Isabelle, for that nice little comment in the chat. All right, have a great night. Take care. And again, our wonderful jurors, Ron Rosenstock, Sean Kernan, and Jessica Roscio, thank you so very much for all your work. We're going to miss you so much. You've been a part of our lives for the last several weeks. So take care. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.